Trying to hype myself up. Welcome to another episode of Becoming a Techno Wizard. And today we are going to continue our series on my newsletter, um, a new story of humanity, my compendium on how we can build a better future, better world. Uh, I'm a bit tired today, very busy, but super excited nonetheless to go through yet another section, part 9, our delusions of human nature. So, the last section we talked about the local maxima, um, and how we've kind of limited our idea of evolution and our idea of ourselves by kind of thinking of ourselves, at some peak evolution when really it's kind of a local maximum, which we kind of trapped ourselves in this artificial peak or this peak, or really it is an artificial peak. And there probably is better kind of places where we can go, but we will never get there if we keep thinking ourselves, at this, perfect place in history and time, and we don't, cha- try to change our environment in order to um, encourage better behaviors and better cultures and things like that. But I think this is my last section on human nature. We'll see. But let's begin. Says our delusions of human nature. Unfortunately, we have deluded ourselves into thinking that humans are more evolved than other creatures or more fit by narrowly defining what fitness is and sabotaging others from competing. This seems like a powerful thing, but it comes with the risk of viewing ourselves as some static being that never has to change, and even as one that can't change. This puts us in direct opposition to the natural environment, which is constantly changing. So if we deem ourselves incapable of change or having reached some superior form where no further change is necessary, then when that inevitable big environmental change comes, we will not be able to adapt, right? And then this is, something we're seeing today. Once again, as always with climate change, um, we see this huge shift in the weather and the patterns of our environment, and it's highly likely that if we don't do something quickly, right? And you can talk to all those scientists who were saying we need to do something by 2030, right? Like if we don't do something quickly, a large variety of our supply chains, our really our just ways of life. Period. Everything from manufacturing to the food we eat to the technology we can use and the resources that we have available. All this stuff, right, will collapse due to the changes in the environment from that climate. And we, as people who depend so much on our current level of technology, will be hard pressed, to really keep up with that level of change, even though we are the ones that cause that change. So, this is why it's really important to realize this stuff. In addition to all of that, we, particularly in the present day, have deluded ourselves or been deluded to believe that we are completely self contained from the environment. We somehow got it in our somewhat collective consciousness the idea that the environment is just something we happen to inhabit, but has little to no sway on our behaviors, right? And I've been learning more and more about this as I've been getting into social ecology and learning about Murray Bookchin and folks like that. Man, we'll see if I have time to talk about that. But let's continue. In some ways, it's deeply arrogant. In others, it's deeply insecure. It's arrogant because it's like going outside in the rain and thinking that we have suddenly chosen to make ourselves cold and wet, or that we simply have to be better citizens, be productive, be disciplined, be wealthy, etc., in order to stop being cold and wet, rather than realizing that we never had any direct control of whether or not we felt cold and wet. It's also insecure because it's like going outside in the rain and thinking that being cold and wet is just the natural state of our being. And we have exposed this sorry part of ourselves by leaving the comfort of our caves, homes. When, of course, in reality, being cold and wet is a natural state we find ourselves in as a result of certain environmental conditions. This is huge, right? I don't know if I went too far with this metaphor here, but the point of this is like oftentimes Well, let me see if I mentioned this. I hope I did. I'll get back to this though. Instead, we must realize that first of all, we are beings living in a world, and that world has an impact on us no matter how smart we are. Our feelings, emotions, our logic, rationality, our behaviors and traits are all strongly impacted by the various environments we find ourselves in. Our power does not lie in deluding ourselves whether the into thinking the weather responds to our thoughts or that there is no weather, but instead in recognizing the weather as a pattern, understanding its impact on us and the environment, and responding accordingly. Whether that be to build our own environments to protect ourselves, or even one day to change the environment so much that we can control the weather and deal with the whatever responsibilities such powers demand. So the world is full of problems, and many of those problems are of our own creation. These problems are not simply the result of human nature, but instead the result of misunderstanding the impact nature has on humans and the nature of human impact. So yeah, um, I I definitely go into it in different ways later, but I probably should have, stepped out of that metaphor of the rain and the weather just in case people didn't understand what I'm saying here. But a good example of this in real life is, for instance, depression, right? People love to think like you often hear this idea that intelligence is tied to depression, right? Like the smarter you are, the more depressed you are. Therefore, being depressed is just, oh, that's just, the tools of the trade. That's just the result of being intelligent, smart people, right? But no, uh, intelligence and depression are correlated, right? In that more having more intelligence exposes you to the risk of more deeper depression because you can think yourself into it and you can overthink and overthink and overthink, right? Um, and it is unlikely that other animals experience depression, but we don't know yet, right? We have seen other examples of animals actually feeling sadness, like elephants, feel sadness that we can obviously tell that from their dead, and they carry around their dead like the bodies of their dead babies and things like that for months carrying it around. So clearly they feeling some some clear, sadness there. But the point here is that um yes, intelligence may expose you to that risk, but it doesn't mean that you must be depressed or that, with intelligence comes depression. It's not like, one causes the other per se. It's that the other material conditions, right, in your environment cause depression, and then your intelligence, exponentiates that experience. And I say as a person who's dealt with depression for a long time, right? It's important for people to realize that because without that we tend to think that, oh, it's better to be, dumb so we don't have to be depressed, or it's better to be this. Like, no, that's not how it works. And the same thing goes for many of our aspects of society, right? The idea that you need some sort of economic pay, right? Some sort of monetary value in order for people to work, right? When in reality people just work because they enjoy working. People enjoy having a sense of purpose and feeling like they're contributing to the community, right? Or just expressing themselves and exploring the world and building something cool. Like, people want to do these things by default, right? Regardless of whether or not they get paid to do it. But in our current system, you need to get paid in order to live, right? This is a unique system that hasn't really been true for most of human history. That's why a lot of us are feeling so much anxiety and angst and depression, right? Because it's abstracted, right? The work that you do for your employer or for whatever doesn't really have much to do with your value as a human being, right? But because we tie our money to our value, to quote unquote value, even though value really it should be a qualitative thing, but we turned it into a quantitative thing, right? And because of that, many of us feel devalued. Many of us feel dehumanized, right? So to bring this all the way back to my explanation here, right? Walking the rain here, the weather is essentially a metaphor for the environment, right? The economy, physical resources available to us, the society in which we live in, right? All these things are kind of outside external factors, right? And you can't control what happens to you out there. You can only control your own responses, right? And how you react to that, right? But we think ourselves, oh, if you just pull yourself up by your bootstrap, you can control how much wealth you have. But in reality, a lot of that wealth, right, is a result of the culture that you're in, the environment, the neighborhood, who you know, your skin color, all these other things, right? Um, and none of that you can control. So to assume that the status that people have due to like in their amount of money or their class, their influence, right, to assume all of that is directly correlated to their willpower or their value or their skills is inherently wrong. It's arrogant and insecure. So the point of this entire section is that we need to realize that we're deluding ourselves if we think that it's human nature to live in the world that we live in today. We've lived in very different worlds throughout most of human history, and we can go back there, or at least, take from take lessons, right, from those 300,000 years of human history and apply it to today, right? We can restructure how we live today, the environments that we live in today, so that we can have the types of behaviors and desires and cultures and value systems that will actually help us, that will actually uh, play into the type of lives that we want to live. But yeah, that's about over 10 minutes. So I'll end it there. Always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you have any ideas or discussions or anything that you want to talk about, feel free to put in the comments. Always grateful for these conversations and discussions. And let me know what you are taking away from this stuff. I'm super excited to get into the next part, this evolution of human sentience, because oh my, I went deep into some evolutionary science for this, and this right here is going to be exciting to go over. But that's for next week, I think. What's it? Wednesday? Yeah, that's next week. So come back on Monday, and we'll get into it. Thanks again. Have a great day. See ya. Bye bye.